welcome to the Legal Eagle. My guest on the show this week is someone who's an Indian Congress politician, a senior advocate, a law teacher, and an eminent author. It takes me great privilege to welcome on the show one of the country's most prominent lawyers, Mr. Salman Khurshid. Mr. Khurshid, as I thank you for being on the Legal Eagle, I start your journey at the very beginning. I want to know a little bit more about your schooling days. Then you went off to Oxford. You were at St. Stephen's College. What impacted you to take up law? Because I know no one in your family, it was a political family, political legacy, but no one had actually done law. How did the early days start off?
I would surprise you that there has been law in the family. My grandfather, Dr. Zakir Hussain, his father was very deeply involved in law. They passed away as a young man practicing in Hyderabad of all places. He was, I think, barely 40. But by then he had written several books in Persian. So in that sense, there was some law in the family, in the DNA. But yes, of course, for all other practical purposes, I am a first-generation lawyer. My family, of course, are described as being in politics and of politics, but my family too wasn't really that deeply involved in politics. My grandfather came into public life because Pandit Nehru and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi brought him at a very high level in public life. Otherwise, he was an educationist. He remained a teacher, a vice chancellor at Aligarh University. My father was a civil servant in the sense that he worked for transportation in Delhi and in Rampur, for the Nawab of Rampur. So, and I think briefly when I was very, very young in Jammu Kashmir. So we weren't really a family of politicians and certainly not a family of lawyers. So in that sense, in many ways, this is first generation.
Yes. I wanted to then ask you about how you taught at Trinity for 3 years. What were those years like?
Audacity. I couldn't have imagined that I would get to Oxford, and if I got to Oxford that I would teach. I didn't really have a mentor, as it were, who would see me through. I just insisted that my father let me go to Oxford. I didn't know how I would pay my way through Oxford. I had a small scholarship, but the British Council provided me with a fee waiver. But that was after I reached my college in Oxford that I finally had a fee waiver from British Council. My father, of course, had to come up with the rest of the money that was required, and I did my undergraduate degree in law. Then I just liked Oxford so much that I wanted to stay on to do a BCL. I'd got a first in the undergraduate degree, so it was just sailing through to the BCL. That was one more year. And then towards the end of BCL, I wondered what I would do. I mean, would I go to the bar? Would I come back to India? And there was an opening to start teaching law at Trinity College. I applied and I got selected. And so I taught for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, I should have then stayed on to become a full-time tutor, which would have been a lifetime's commitment, or come back to India. I chose to come back to India because that's the time when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was fighting his first election. There was this great Camelot romance in the air. So I came back.
You've said somewhere that you're very fond of theatre because it's an integration of cultures. What attracts you to theatre?
Well, I got into theatre as part of what you do in public school in our country. You do theatre, you do sports, you do declamation, you do debating, and then if you want more excitement, you do trekking, you go up to the hills, you do camping. So we went through all that. I did all of that when I was at school. theatre caught my fancy. It was, in a sense, it was something that made your spirits go high. And so I stuck to theatre. When I came out of school, I got into college. Marcus Murch was the big name in theatre in our country. Marcus had become a friend. We had done a play together for all students of DPS, of Delhi Public School. And from there, and that was the play that kindly brought me onto the Delhi stage. And then Marcus asked me to do Professor Higgins in Pygmalion. Very reluctantly. I didn't want to get back to theatre because I was taking my college very seriously. I had to go to Oxford and therefore I had to get a first. I then reluctantly agreed to do Higgins, and that's where I met my wife, Louise, who was doing in Pygmalion was the play, and she was doing Eliza. So that's where we met. Of course, we then drifted apart. She went to the US, I went to the UK. I met many years later, and we got married.
Mimicry? Can we have you mimic someone?
Well, I'm not. I mean, mimicry takes an ambience and place. But I tell you, I'm very fond of doing my friend Arun Shourie. I've done him in several places. Once when he was actually present, and I can do very briefly. I could do Arun Shourie for you. How would he do it now? Look here. If you're talking about the rulers of our country, then the rulers have to be told where to stop. And if they don't know where to stop, they will have to be removed. What do you think?
That is amazing. Your persona changed. I could think of Mr. Shourie saying those lines. I now go across to 1981. You came back from Oxford to a job in Indira Gandhi's PMO as the OSD. In 1989, you lost a Lok Sabha election from Farrukhabad. In 1991, you won the same seat, became MOS for the External Affairs for the Narasimha Rao government. It is also that time when the historic image of you in the bear hug with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, former Prime Minister of India, came. He was heading the Indian delegation to the United Nations after India tasted diplomatic success at the international body. But a lot of detractors at that time commented on a cozy relationship.
Let me just tell you an interesting bit of story around that. I did all that and was all very well to be put on the front cover of magazine and so on. I went back to fight my next election, and the picture that was on the front cover of the magazine was converted into thousands of copies in black and white, which were put out in Muslim areas, saying that I had a deal with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. I could not be trusted because I had a deal with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. We lost that election. Having lost that election, I came back and I met Mr. Vajpayee, who was Prime Minister. I met him at a party. Ashwani Kumar, my friend, he had held a little event at which Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's Prime Minister was present, came up to me and said, "What happened? What happened? It's so sad that you're not in Parliament." And I said, "Only thanks to you, Mr. Vajpayee. your bear hug went from house to house in Farrukhabad and cost me my seat." And he had a very good laugh about that. But things changed. Subsequently, I've had pictures of the same picture and other pictures sitting with Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Narasimha Rao, again taken at the same time when we'd returned from Geneva, saying, and on the screen of a black and white television in between, they show the demolition of Babri Masjid, as though all this happened, and there we were sitting back and having a good laugh. That cost me another election. But that's the kind of politics that we started moving towards. And now, of course, we know that politics is completely different from the times of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Mr. Narasimha Rao.
Your maternal grandfather, Mr. Zakir Hussain, was India's first Muslim president. Your father, Khurshid Alam Khan, was a Congress minister, also a governor. You grew up in the heart of political Delhi, moving from the elite St. Stephen's to Oxford. Your lineage is there, but you you're on it with an easy charm. But I also remember a time when the Anna movement had been at the very forefront of everything. And I remember a time when Kapil Sibal and P. Chidambaram were having talks with Team Anna, so as to say at that time, and they were not working out. And that's when you were brought in. You were able to solve it out, salvage the situation of that Lokpal issue. And very soon we saw you emerging as the spokesperson for the Indian National Congress at all stages. So how do you describe your political journey?
I had a good equation with Mr. Kejriwal and his colleagues. I'd known Kiran Bedi for a long time. But when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee was leading our negotiations with the India Against Corruption group, they played dirty. They were not honorable, both towards him and to many of us. And they did things that were hurtful. But for us, it was important that we had to find some way of overcoming the stalemate. What was important really was to break through that stalemate and then look forward. And fortunately, one was able to use one's communication that still survived and able to talk to them and get them to accept what we needed and we wanted. But you know, there were things done then by India Against Corruption that were very, very mean.
You're the chief of the party's manifesto in Uttar Pradesh. Right now, there's a lot of buzz coming about conversion that's taking place, where the UP ATS has said that conversion that began in Uttar Pradesh and 1,000 youths have been converted has spanned over 24 states. They've also said this conversion is having foreign funding. Do you think a stronger law is needed to ensure that conversion doesn't take place? And how does India deal with this problem now?
If money is coming for conversion or for some unwholesome thing, it's coming for any form of terrorism or any form of undermining India's security, you should be absolutely ruthless with such people. Who tells you not to be ruthless? But to just spread word and say that there is this thing happening on a large scale, I think it's a very irresponsible thing. There is a law in this country against forceful conversion. There is a law in this country against giving allurement to convert. That law should be explicitly and strictly applied. You can't keep talking about we need another law, we need another thing, we need to do something, etc. Why aren't they just doing what they are responsible for? Apply the law. Apply the law and take whatever action you want to take. Nobody is stopping you. Nobody is stopping you. But I do believe that this is perhaps being done for a variety of reasons. And one of the reasons is to create an atmosphere in the country in which people begin to suspect each other, people begin to dislike each other and to hate each other. I think this is the greatest betrayal of India. If you want India to be safe and secure, you've got to do what brings people together, not makes people part. I think that's a very, very clear statement that we need to make in this country.
But Mr. Khurshid, if there is in fact the ATS that's coming out as an enforcement agency with evidence that money has come in and also with evidence that 1,000 youths have been converted, how are then any government or any agency to proceed without saying that there needs to be a central agency to be looking into this and ensuring that conversions do not happen?
Why should conversions happen, and what were they doing in UP?
UP and 24 other states.
What were they doing in UP? Why don't they just stop it in UP first? If it's happening in UP, why don't they stop it in UP first? And then we'll think about the other states. Now, ATS says that this is happening.
Yes.
ATS says there are a lot of things happening. And what does the ATS show as its record for conviction in courts of law? 6%? So, when they come with what they believe are watertight charge sheets, they don't get convictions. So, should we overturn the law of the country and we overturn the constitutional arrangement of this country because ATS can't get convictions simply because they are thoroughly incompetent? That's why. If they were competent, we would have at least 30, 40, 50%, 60% convictions. So I'm sorry, I don't buy this story. But if there is something that is unwholesome, if there is something that needs to be addressed, well, ATS must address it. The police in UP must address it and then come clean with the record to show to the country what they have done and what are the circumstances in which they've done it.
I also want to ask you about Twitter. Twitter is embroiled, Mr. Khurshid, in yet another controversy. They violated India's IT rules. They now have a demographic map change in India. Earlier, they had another map change where they showed Leh to be a part of China. How does India come out with a policy to be handling these giants?
There are issues about the law that's respected across the world, and there are issues about the law in our own country. Now, as Indians, we obviously have to respect the law in our own country, first and foremost. But we have to keep in mind what the standard in the world is. And we have to find sensible accommodation between the standard in the world and our own requirements. I think we can't be too cagey. We can't be doing this so that we can go back to something that we've suddenly created called coup or what have you. If we are doing it because this is genuinely necessary, we ought to do it. But if we are not doing it for that reason, we ought not to do it. You can't give the world an impression that we want to build barriers around us and we want to be an isolationist country. We want to be part of the world. And if we want to be part of the world, we'll have to accept the standards that the world applies. Of course, there should be a debate, there should be a discussion, there should be a negotiation, and we should opt for the best for ourselves. We can't be pushed around, but we can't just be a dog in the manger and not accept what the world requires and world believes is necessary.
But Mr. Khurshid, we've also seen UK, US, Germany come out with similar complaints against the social media giants, whether it's Germany talking about its terrorism policy with Facebook and telling them to ensure that certain things that are harming their sovereignty are not put on Facebook, whether it's UK saying the similar things to Twitter and Twitter complying with it, but Twitter in India not complying with it.
I think if there are double standards, then there's no question of accepting it. But why are we such a pushover? That Twitter accepts what UK says and France says and doesn't accept what India says. Why are we becoming such a pushover? Is there some problem? Do we not know how to communicate? Do we not know?
How should Twitter be told, because the case is also pending in the Delhi High Court, that let's call a spade and you're violating IT rules. What should the future be then for?
There was an IT rule that Supreme Court shut down.
I remember.
66A.
66, yeah.
So just saying that you're violating an IT rule or IT regulation is not enough. You've got to actually get down on your knees, onto the drawing board, put the drawing board clear before the court, let the court take a clear decision, quick decision, expedite the matter before the court so that everybody in this country is assured and comfortable that our courts and our judges have upheld it. But let's not just go to the judges when we want something upheld in our favor and then decry that the judges are interfering too much in the way we apply the law in our own country. But so when those three people who protested in the CAA protests are released by the Delhi High Court, we go and complain that the Delhi High Court is doing something terribly wrong. And then when Twitter does something to us, we run to the High Court to say Twitter is doing something terribly wrong. We've got to have a proper balance and we've got to be objective about what is right and what is wrong.
The micro-blogging platform shows Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh detached from the country that was done earlier. It was conveyed to Twitter. We showed our strong disapproval. But earlier, Leh was shown as a part of China. Isn't this them trying to go out of India's boundaries and trying and doing something mischievous, malicious?
Well, if they're doing that, let them go. Let them leave the country. What is the toing and froing? If somebody doesn't believe in your basic sovereignty, then they have to go. Who's stopping you? Then they have to go. But you can't keep them here, keep dealing with them, expect them to cooperate with you where it's convenient for you, and then say you're wrong here. If they don't know how to put the right map, then they don't know anything. That's true. We are in times of modern technology. In the past, what we would do is we would put a stamp on the book on that particular page to say this map is wrong. You can't do that today here in modern technology. So we have to find some other solutions. But if you think something is unacceptable, then you should sacrifice whatever advantage you have from it and tell them, please go, we don't want you. But you must also please discuss it with other people in the country. Discuss it with the opposition parties as well. Take us on board. If it's something to do with India's prestige and India's sovereignty, we will be the first to stand up with them.
Mr. Khurshid, you said opposition party. I want to ask you, you're the chief of the Congress party's Manifesto committee for the state. UP elections are around the corner. Who should be leading the ship in UP for the Congress party?
Srimati Priyanka Gandhi Vadra is this general secretary who's in charge, leading the effort from the front. If she's leading the effort from the front, she must at an appropriate stage take a decision and let you know and everybody know about that decision. I can't be announcing it. Today, I'm quite happy that she's there to lead us from the front. Whether that lead from the front will translate into something more that you all want to hear is something that she will decide in appropriate stage.
As someone who's been very closely associated with Uttar Pradesh, what would your advice to the Congress be? A lot of people say they are losing ground. They need to gain ground, whether it's the elections that we've seen in West Bengal, whether it's the elections we've seen in Puducherry, Kerala, Assam. It's become a small, weak party. Several people are leaving it. What would your advice to the party be?
Well, if somebody believes that this party is always going to remain weak, I again have very little to say to them. But for people who believe, who are here because they believe that we will get this party back into shape. We have faith in our party. We have a destination that we will move towards. If we can't do it in our lifetime, our successors will do it. But we are not going anywhere. And if we are not going anywhere, the party is not going anywhere.
So who will be leading the party at a national level?
At the national level, we have leaders. We've got Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. She's our leader. She's in fact the working president of the Congress party just now, acting president of the Congress party. We have Mr. Rahul Gandhi. He is a leader. He's not the president anymore, but he's a leader. Now, people want a label for him. But the label will come when it comes. We have a leader. We have 3 leaders.
But there are so many people within the Congress party, and I speak to very less of them, maybe more who are inclined towards governance or legal, and they're disgruntled. What do we say to people within the party who are disgruntled?
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. I would answer this question if I was disgruntled, but I'm not disgruntled. And
but people are not hopeful.
No, surely their condition is no worse than mine, and their understanding is no worse than mine. And if I don't have a problem and I'm not disgruntled, I don't understand why they are disgruntled. They must come and explain.
Well, you can see this, the results for this election polls that have just come out. The Congress has been badly defeated. You yourself have somewhere said that we can also learn from the BJP and how it's become a very important opposition party in Bengal.
I said to think big. When BJP had nothing, it said we will win. When we have so much, why are we saying we will not win? That's what I said, and I believe that's an unexceptional statement. But we've not succeeded in these 4. I don't remember anybody asking me questions about the time when we succeeded in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. Nobody asked me, why did you succeed? Nobody asked me, why did you succeed? And when we didn't succeed in these 4, everybody wants to know, why didn't you succeed? Now, we know the reasons why we didn't succeed. There are things to be done. We will do them. We had a report to submit. We submitted that report within 15 days. The party will reflect on it. Party will decide what is the best thing to do based on that report, hopefully, if our report is accepted.
Do you think the party will go alone in Uttar Pradesh, or will there be alliances?
Nobody is offered talks for alliances today. And we are not announcing any alliance unless somebody meaningfully talks to us about an alliance. We are by ourselves, and we have to prepare to fight every seat. But given the atmosphere in the country in the past 10 years, alliances, even for parties that are strong, have become inevitable. A lot of people in the UPA, or the loose UPA, if you like, are meeting amongst themselves, talking amongst themselves, are making statements, public statements. Something was made by Tejasvi Yadav yesterday. Something else has been said by Shiv Sena and the NCP 2 days ago. So a lot of people are talking about it. I'm not actually aware of at what intense level there are discussions within our party top leadership. But I imagine there will be, in due course, there will be some discussion. Whatever decision is the best for the party and for the country, we will take.
Often not known, but you do a lot of pro bono cases. You put in a lot of hard days work. Whenever I come here, you always have clients here. I know that you're still very attached to the house that you're living in. That was your grandfather's. There are lots of animals there, whether it's the dogs, whether it's the cats, whether it's the parrot. What is a normal day in your life like, and how do you unwind?
I do have a lot of dogs and a lot of cats. It's been my passion. A lot of birds. It's been my passion,
yes.
And I sadly cannot give them except for 4 or 5 that stay around me. I can't give them the kind of time they deserve and they need and they want. So on the weekends or whenever I can find time, I give it to them. I want to do a lot of writing and a lot of reading, which is difficult when courts are in session. Very difficult because you're preparing each night. You're preparing for next morning. I like trekking. I like wildlife, but then again, haven't been able to do it for a while because of COVID. Traveling up to the hills was not feasible, not possible. So the day remains abnormal, but somehow I can put the pieces together by the evening and get by.
Mr. Khurshid, we thank you for being a part of the Legal. I would say it started off by talking about your journey as a very senior, prominent lawyer, but also the astute politician you are. These questions had to be asked and they were remarkably answered. Thank you for being a part of the Legal, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.